So, first thing we need to touch on is responsive design. Necessity nowadays requires that we have responsive design. And responsive web design is about using HTML and CSS to automatically resize, hide, shrink, or enlarge a website to make it look good on all devices, such as desktops, tablets, and phones. This requires us to look at fluid widths, media queries, and examine relative units over absolute units. And we want to particularly select a mobile-first design method. So, CSS media queries. So we have media types. Using media queries, we can tailor a style for a sheet to desktop, laptop, or tablet, or a mobile phone, such as iPhone and Android phones. If you go ahead and click on this, and we go ahead and run it, we're using that media query, and we're using the only keyword and the and keyword, and we're setting the max width to be 600 pixels. So if I go ahead and I adjust the screen, you can see the background color changes from green to light blue. So we covered the concept of a link tag and we covered the concept of a media attribute. So the max width is the maximum width of the display area, such as a browser window. The min width is the minimum width of the display area, such as a browser window. The and keyword combines a media feature with a media type or other media feature. As a rule of thumb, we have these parameters for a widescreen. For standard, these parameters. For tablet, these parameters. And mobile, these parameters. Let's go ahead and touch on EM and REM units. I'll click on this. So, CSS units. CSS units have several different types. So many properties like length values such as width, margin, padding, and font size are specified. So length is a number followed by a length unit such as 10 pixels or 2 EM. We have an example here. We can go ahead and try this. So we have 60 EM. I can run this. Sixty pix. 25 EM. And 25 pix. 50 EM. You can see that this adjusts the sizing around this. There we go. So EM is relative to the font size of the parent element. REM is relative to the font size of the root element. It's useful with media queries. Let's go ahead and try REM. So we have this heading here. We can change this to 10 REM. This is a heading of 1. There we go. Now we have vertical width and vertical height. These are percentages of a viewport. So vertical width and vertical height is essentially a way for us to modify the viewport relative to the display. So vertical width is 100 slices from left to right. Vertical height is 100 slices from top to bottom. Let's discuss advanced selectors. So we have direct child. The element selector is used to select elements with a specified parent. Note that elements are not directly a child of the specified parent, and they're not selected by wildcard. Then we have directly after. The element in the element selector is used to select an element that is directly after another specific element. Then we have by attribute. The attribute selector is used to select elements with a specified attribute, such as text. Let's look at an example. So here we're selecting div down to parent. You can see that this will not be styled. However, I live in Duckburg is. Now we have directly after. So using div, the and paragraph, we can see that we have I live in Duckburg, just div p, I live in Duckburg. And then we have my best friend is Mickey. In this case, my best friend is Mickey will be styled. Then we have by attribute. So the CSS attribute selector. The attribute selector is used to select items with a specified attribute. The following example selects A tag elements with a target attribute. As you can see, we have elements with the A tag attribute selected. Let's discuss CSS pseudo selectors. So, first child. The first child selector is used to select a specified selector only if it is the first child of its parent. Last child. The last child selector matches every element that is the last child of its parent. The nth child selector matches every element that is the nth child regardless of type of its parent. Note that n can be any number, a keyword, or a formula. So it follows, we have a number, increment n, and start. Even a keyword can be used to match elements whose index is even the index of the first child, which is 1. We have odd. So if it's odd, a keyword can be used to match elements whose index is odd, and the index of the first child is 1. Let's look at these examples. So this paragraph is the first child of its parent body. This paragraph is the first child of its parent div. Now we can look at the last child. So in this paragraph, we have the last child, right, the fourth paragraph, and that is styled to be red. Now we have the nth child. The nth child selector matches every element that is the nth child regardless of its type of parent. So in this case, we have the first paragraph, then we have the second paragraph. And the nth child is the second paragraph, and we're styling that to be red. So note, n can be a number, a keyword, or a formula. We can increment n and then add a start. If it's even, a keyword that can be used to match child elements whose index is even, the index of the first child is 1. Odd, So if it's odd, the keyword can be used to match child elements whose index is odd. The index of the first child is 1. Let's look at some more selectors. So we have the hover element. The hover selector is used to select elements when you mouse over them. Let's look at an example. So the hover selector style links on mouse over. We have our A tag and we have hover. So here's our A tag. We hover over it. Let's take a look at the focus selector. The focus selector is used to select the element with focus. So we have an input focus. As I click on this, we can see that it focuses on the element. So here's the focus selector. Now we'll look at the visited selector. It says select and style the visited links. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. So the visited selector style links to pages you've already visited. As you can see here, this page has already been visited. This is useful in case someone has gone to a site and they want to keep track of where they are on a page. We wouldn't want to have to redo this. We would want to know what we've already visited. The checked selector matches every checked input element, only for radio buttons and checkboxes, and the option element. So here we can see the check selector. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. So if the input style is checked, we can go ahead and look at it. So checked, checked. So the height will be 50 pixels and the width will be 50 pixels. So if we check this, we can see the difference. Now I can look at in range and out of range. In range. The in range selector selects all elements with a value that is within a specified range. Note, the in range selector only works for input elements with min and or max attributes. Let's go ahead and try this example. So if we have an in range selector, we have a demo right here. Try typing a number out of range less than 5 or higher than 10 to see the style disappear. Okay, less than 5 or higher than 10. So less than 5. And 12. Then we have out of range. So the out of range selector selects all elements with a value that is outside of a specified range. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. So try typing a number within the given range between 5 and 10 to see the styling disappear. Let's try 7. Let's try 12. So that is the out of range selector. Input out of range, specifying the border. Now look at after and before. So we'll click on this. This is the CSS after selector. The after selector inserts something after the content of each selected element. Let's go ahead and try this. So here we have the content, remember this? So the demo of the after selector. We have our paragraph, and then we have content, remember this, added afterwards. Let's look at the before selector. So let's insert some text before the content of each paragraph element. Go ahead and try this. So before, we have read this. My name is Donald. So this is the before selector. The content property is used with the before and after pseudo elements to insert generated content. All right, let's look at background image and overlays. So we can look at the position absolute. An element with position absolute is positioned relative to the nearest position ancestor instead of position relative to the viewport like fixed. However, if an absolute position element has no position ancestors, it uses the document body and moves along the page with scrolling. So we'll click on those. And let's go ahead and run it. This is position static. We've covered this. We've covered position relative. We've covered position fixed. We've covered position absolute. Covered position sticky. We have looked at here we have an example of position absolute. An element with position absolute is positioned relative to the nearest position ancestor instead of position relative to the viewport like fixed. So an element with position absolute is positioned relative to the nearest position ancestor. However, if an absolute position element has no position ancestors, it uses the document body and moves along page scrolling. Then we have the z-index. The z-index property specifies the stack order of an element. An element with greater stack order is always in front of an element with lower stack order. So we can set the z-index for an image. So in this case, we have a z-index of -1. And this is a image here, and we're applying the style to this image. Because the image has a z-index of -1, it will be placed behind the heading. We'll continue the discussion on CSS Flexbox in the future.